I spent 31 years teaching other men how to protect what mattered to them. Turns out I never learned how to protect it from my own daughter. It doesn't announce itself. The moment you stop being someone's father and start being someone's mark, there's no siren, no flashing light. It happens in the space between a phone call you didn't think twice about and a signature you didn't read closely enough. You just wake up one day and realize the people who are supposed to guard your back have been going through your pockets the whole time and smiling while they did it. My name is Walter Grady. I'm 68 years old, 31 years with the Cincinnati Fire Department, the last 9 of them as a battalion chief, before I hung it up in 2017, with a pension I'd earned the hard way, and a body full of the kind of aches nobody warns you about at the academy. I bought this house on Winding Creek Road in Hyde Park back in 1994, when the neighborhood was still affordable for a firefighter, and not just for the doctors and lawyers who live here now. Brick colonial, wraparound porch, the oak tree out front that my late wife Carol planted the year we moved in, back when it was barely taller than she was. Carol passed 4 years ago. Ovarian cancer, caught late, gone in 11 months. I won't dwell on that because that's not the story I came here to tell you, but I need you to understand something before we go any further. After Carol died, my daughter Michelle became the only family I had left who called me just to talk, not just on holidays. And when your world shrinks down to one person, you stop asking the questions you should be asking about that person. You just hold on. I want to tell you what I saw, because what I saw was enough to fool a man who spent 3 decades reading danger in burning buildings and thought he had a good enough eye to read people too. But first, let me tell you what I didn't know was happening at the exact same time I was falling more and more in love with the daughter I thought I'd gotten back. If you're new here, stick around, because stories like this only keep coming if you hit subscribe and let us know you're listening. All right, let's get into it. Michelle is my only child, 41 years old, divorced 3 years back from a man named Dean who I never much cared for, raising my 2 grandkids, Ava and Miles, mostly on her own in an apartment over in Oakley. After Carol died, Michelle started coming around more. Sunday dinners first, then Wednesday check-ins. Then she was just there, in my kitchen, refilling my coffee before I asked for it, going through the mail with me at the table like it was the most natural thing in the world. I thought God had sent me a second chance. I really did. Here's what I want you to hold on to as I tell you the rest of this, because it matters later. Michelle asked me to add her to my checking account for emergencies 6 weeks after Carol's funeral. 6 weeks? I was drowning in grief so deep I couldn't tell you what day of the week it was, most mornings. And my daughter walked into that fog with a folder and a pen and told me it would make things easier on both of us. I didn't think twice. Why would I? She was my daughter. She'd sat by her mother's hospital bed every single day for 11 months. She'd held my hand at the funeral home when I couldn't make myself pick out a casket. A woman who does that for her mother doesn't turn around and rob her father. That's not how grief works. That's not how love works. That's what I believed, anyway. The account she asked to be added to wasn't my only account. There was the checking account for household expenses, sure, but there was also the account that mattered my retirement. $412,000. 31 years of hazard pay and overtime, and every bonus I never spent, because I always figured Carol and I would need it someday for something. A trip we kept putting off. A cushion in case one of us got sick, which, as it turned out, one of us did. After Carol passed, that money didn't have a name on it anymore, except one, whatever was left of my life, and whatever might be left for my grandkids after I was gone. Michelle knew about that account too. She'd always known about it. What I didn't know was that she'd started paying very close attention to it the moment her mother's obituary ran in the Cincinnati Enquirer. For the first year after Carol died, Michelle was everything a father could ask for. She drove me to my cardiologist appointments at Christ Hospital on Auburn Avenue. She sat with me on the porch on Sunday evenings and let me talk about Carol for hours without once checking her phone or looking like she wanted to be anywhere else. She brought the grandkids over enough that the house didn't feel so much like a mausoleum. Ava, who's 9, would sit next to me on the porch swing and ask me questions about the fire department that made me laugh for the first time in months. Miles, who's 6, called me Grandpa Chief, because Michelle had told him that's what everyone at the firehouse used to call me. And something about hearing that from a 6-year-old's mouth put a little bit of light back into a house that had gone very dark. I thanked God for her every single day. I want you to remember that while I tell you the rest of this. Here's what I didn't see. The first transfer out of my retirement account happened 5 weeks after she was added to it. 5 weeks. She wasn't spending that year on my porch because she needed her father. She was spending it making sure her father trusted her completely before she needed anything from him. I didn't know that yet. I wouldn't know it for a long, long time. Month 7 after Carol passed, I had a bad stretch. My blood pressure spiked. The doctor put me on new medication that made me foggy for about 2 weeks. And on top of all that, I threw my back out, moving one of Carol's old dressers out of the bedroom because I finally felt ready to clear some of her things out. And I couldn't do much of anything for myself for close to 10 days. Michelle came over every day that week. She cooked, she cleaned, she picked up my prescriptions from the CVS on Erie Avenue, and on the 8th day, she sat down across from me at the kitchen table with a folder. She had that same measured, careful way of talking her mother used to have when she was about to deliver bad news gently. Dad, I need to talk to you about something, and I need you to really hear me on this. I remember thinking, in that moment, how much she sounded like Carol. That should have told me something. Instead, it just made me trust her more. You're 68, Dad. You just threw your back out doing something as simple as moving a dresser. What happens if something more serious happens to you? A stroke, a fall, anything. Everything's still just in your name. If you're incapacitated, even for a few weeks, I can't access anything to take care of you. I can't pay your mortgage. I can't handle your medical bills. I'd have to go through a court just to help my own father. Every word she said landed exactly where I was most afraid. I hadn't told anyone, not even Michelle, about the private fear I'd been sitting with since Carol's funeral, that I would end up alone in this house, helpless, with nobody legally able to step in and help me until it was too late. Michelle didn't know that fear existed. Or maybe she did. Maybe that's exactly why she waited until my back was broken and my mind was foggy from new medication to bring me a folder. This is a durable power of attorney, she said, sliding it toward me slowly, giving me time to look, the way you'd hand a nervous animal something it needed to sniff before it trusted you. It just means I can step in and manage things if you ever can't. Bills, accounts, medical decisions if it ever comes to that. You've done enough for this family, Dad. Let me be the one who carries this. My eyes were tired. My back was screaming. I was 3 days into a new medication that made the whole world feel like it was underwater. I read maybe half of that document before I signed it, and God forgive me, I was relieved when I did. I thought I'd finally put a plan in place. Something responsible, something Carol would have wanted. I told myself I was being a smart, prepared old man, instead of the exhausted, grieving one I actually was. Michelle had it notarized 2 days later at a UPS store over on Madison Road. She told me about it afterward, casual, like she was just checking an item off a list. And that night, for the first time since Carol's funeral, I slept 8 hours straight. I thought I'd finally handed something heavy to someone strong enough to carry it. I had handed her the keys to everything I owned. Let's fast forward through the better part of 2 years. Doctor's appointments, holidays, Ava's 9th birthday party at the Skyline Chili on Ridge Road, where she got frosting in her hair and laughed so hard she nearly fell off her chair. Miles's first loose tooth, which he insisted on showing me over FaceTime 4 separate times in 1 week. 2 years of a life that, on the surface, looked like healing, looked like a family putting itself back together after losing its center. Thanksgiving, my sister Denise's house out in Loveland. Denise is 71, sharp as a tack, married to a man named Roger, who spent 26 years in bank fraud investigation before he retired, first with a regional bank here in Ohio, and then the last 11 years with the FDIC. Roger is the kind of man you don't notice at a party, quiet, methodical, always the last one to speak, and usually the only one worth listening to when he finally does. Denise had made her turkey, the way she always does, too dry, God love her, but nobody's ever had the heart to tell her. The house smelled like sage and wood smoke. Ava and Miles were running through the living room with Denise's grandkids, all of them too loud and too happy, in exactly the way kids are supposed to be at Thanksgiving. Michelle was at the far end of the table, laughing at something my brother-in-law's cousin had said, refilling wine glasses without being asked, telling a story about a work trip to Chicago, with the kind of easy confidence of a woman who doesn't have a single thing weighing on her conscience. And then Roger's hand found mine under the table. He pressed his phone into my palm without turning his head, without so much as a glance in my direction. 7 words on the screen. Walter, check your retirement account. Now. And below that, 4 more words. Then say, you're dizzy. I looked up at Roger. His jaw was set tight, his eyes fixed somewhere across the table. Completely still, the eyes of a man who's been carrying a door closed in his mind for a very long time and has finally decided it's time to open it. He gave me one slow nod. The kind that means trust me, don't ask questions, just trust me. I opened my banking app under the table. I hadn't looked at that account in probably 8 months. Michelle handled all of it. That was the arrangement. That's what I had signed for. The number on the screen was $31,200. I stared at it like it was written in a language I used to speak and had somehow forgotten. There had been $412,000 in that account. 31 years of hazard pay, overtime, every dollar Carol and I never spent because we always figured there'd be time later. $31,200. Michelle was laughing at something across the table. Ava ran past behind her chair, shrieking with delight about something only 9-year-olds find that funny. The house smelled like pie now. Denise had just brought out the pumpkin and the pecan, and nobody at that table had any idea that the ground had just come apart under my chair. I pressed my hand against my temple. I'm feeling a little dizzy, I said, quiet, even. I think I need to step outside for some air. Denise was up before I finished the sentence, her hand already on my shoulder, genuine worry on her face, the kind you can't fake, and for a second even Michelle looked concerned, rising halfway out of her chair. Roger helped me up and walked me toward the front door, with a hand under my elbow, like a man half his age might need steadying, and Michelle called after us from the table, Dad, do you need me to come? Do you want me to drive you home? Stay, Roger said, calm as ever. I've got him. We'll call you. And my daughter, my blood, the woman I'd cried with gratitude over more times than I could count in the last 2 years, sat back down at her aunt's Thanksgiving table and picked her wine glass back up like nothing at all had happened. I sat in Roger's truck in Denise's driveway, and the first thing I thought about wasn't the money. It was Ava's 9th birthday. It was the fact that I'd started, quietly, without telling anyone, looking into a trust for the grandkids' college funds, something Carol and I had always talked about doing and never got around to before she passed. That plan, whatever was left of it, was sitting in an account that had just lost $380,000 while I wasn't looking. And the woman who'd taken it was back at the table eating pecan pie like her hands were clean. The truth doesn't come to you all at once. It comes in pieces, and every piece breaks something different. I want you to picture this. A 68-year-old man sitting in the passenger seat of his brother-in-law's pickup truck on a cold Thanksgiving evening in Loveland, Ohio. Porch lights just starting to come on up and down the street. The muffled sound of grandchildren laughing somewhere behind him through a closed door. That man is staring at $31,200 on a phone screen, and that man is completely, unnervingly still, not calm. I need you to understand that. Not calm at all. The kind of still that happens when your mind is handed something so far outside what it expected that it simply refuses to move until it's finished trying to process it. Like a smoke detector going off in a room you were certain was empty. Roger didn't drive me home. He drove me downtown to a quiet office building on 4th Street that housed a small satellite branch of the regional bank. He still consulted for 2 days a week in what was supposed to be a soft, easy retirement. The building was dark, except for the lobby lights. Our footsteps echoed against the marble floor like we were walking into a courtroom instead of an office. In a way, I suppose we were. He shut the door of a small conference room, sat down across from me, and looked at me the way you look at someone right before you tell them something they can't unhear. Walter. He never called me Walter. It was always Chief, a nod to the department, a little joke between us that had stuck for 15 years. Hearing my actual name come out of his mouth told me everything before he said another word. I need you to understand, he said, that everything I'm about to show you has been checked and rechecked. I didn't come to you tonight with a hunch. I came to you with a case. How long have you known? I asked him. 5 months. 5 months. I let that number sit in my chest for a second before I let myself feel anything about it. because the look on Roger's face told me those 5 months hadn't been comfortable for him either. Why did you wait? He folded his hands on the table. Because Denise needed to be completely certain before we tore her only niece apart in front of her father. And because I needed every account frozen and every door closed before Michelle had any idea one was open. I nodded slowly. I understood that completely, even through the fog I was standing in. He opened the folder. He started with the withdrawals. 18 months of them, spaced out at irregular intervals, never the same amount twice, never above $8,900. Always just enough to slide under the automatic reporting threshold banks are required to flag. This has a name, Roger said, sliding the first sheet across the table. It's called structuring. It's a federal offense, separate and apart from the underlying fraud. I looked at 18 months of withdrawal slips laid out in a neat, documented timeline across that conference table. My daughter had been stealing from me with the same careful discipline I'd once tried to teach her when she was young, about saving, about patience, about doing things the right way, even when nobody's watching. She'd finally applied every bit of it, just not to anything good. Then came the mortgage. My house on Winding Creek Road had been paid off since 2011, fully, completely, no lien, nothing. Using the power of attorney I'd signed at my kitchen table 2 years earlier, Michelle had taken out a home equity line of credit against it, $110,000, without me ever knowing the paperwork existed. The bank had sent every statement to a P.O. box she'd opened under a slight variation of my name, Walter T. Grady, instead of Walter James Grady, close enough that nobody at the bank had blinked twice. Then the life insurance. I had a policy from my years with the department, a legacy benefit worth $200,000, with Michelle and my grandkids as the beneficiaries since Carol passed. Roger slid across a beneficiary change form. My signature was on it. I recognized the day. 11 months earlier. A rushed Tuesday morning when I was running behind for a cardiology follow-up, and Michelle had shown up with coffee and a small stack of papers and said, "Dad, just sign these. It's routine. Account maintenance." I've already gone through everything. I signed without reading a word. Among those papers was a form removing my grandchildren, Ava and Miles, as secondary beneficiaries and replacing them with someone named Dean Foster, my daughter's ex-husband. I sat with that for a long moment. Not my daughter's new boyfriend, not a stranger. Her ex-husband, the man she'd divorced 3 years ago, the man I'd never trusted, quietly written back into my legacy without my knowledge. On paperwork, I'd signed with my own tired hand while thinking about a doctor's appointment. Roger wasn't finished. "There's one more thing you need to hear, Walter, and this is the part that's going to matter most." For the past several months, according to what Denise had pieced together through careful, quiet conversations with other family members, Michelle had been making comments, small ones, at church, at a cousin's baby shower, on the phone with an aunt in Columbus. Things like, "Dad's really struggling since Mom passed, more than he lets on, and I worry constantly. He forgets things. He gets confused sometimes, and I've had to step in a lot more than people realize." An elder law attorney Roger had quietly consulted recognized the pattern the moment he heard it laid out. Michelle wasn't just draining my accounts. She was laying the social groundwork, one casual comment at a time, for a guardianship petition. If she could get a court to declare me incapacitated, everything she was already doing illegally would become legally sanctioned. She wouldn't need to hide the withdrawals anymore. She'd have full, court-approved control of every dollar and every decision I had left. She wasn't just robbing me. She was building a cage around me, quietly, patiently, comment by comment, and I hadn't noticed a single bar going up. I sat in that conference room on 4th Street and looked at Roger Ellis, my sister's husband, the quiet man nobody pays much attention to at holiday gatherings, and I felt something shift permanently in my chest. "How did you find all this?" I asked him. "A flagged pattern report crossed my desk purely by coincidence," he said. "Structured withdrawals from a retired public servant's retirement account. I almost didn't open the file. Then I saw your name on it." "And then?" "I closed my office door," he said, "and I didn't say a single word to anyone until I was sure." My phone buzzed. "Michelle." Roger answered it and put it on speaker before I could react. Her voice was tight, controlled, the voice of a woman holding herself together by sheer will. She told us Denise had put the kids down for a movie. Everyone was fine. And then she asked, careful, almost too careful, whether I was doing okay, whether it was my blood pressure again. Then she paused. Dad, she said, before you left, Ava asked where Grandpa Chief went. I told her you'd be back soon. She wanted you to know she saved you a piece of pie. Nobody in that conference room said anything for a moment. I felt something crack open in my chest that had nothing to do with the money at all. I told her I'd stepped out for some air, and I'd call her tomorrow. She said okay, and something in her voice almost sounded like relief, like she'd been waiting to hear that I still believed her. After we hung up, Roger said quietly, almost to himself, "What do you want to do, Walter?" Here's the thing about being 68 years old. Sitting in an empty downtown office on Thanksgiving night with $31,000 to your name, where $412,000 used to be, and the entire weight of what just happened, pressing down through every joint in your body, that 31 years of running into burning buildings had already worn down. You have two ways to go. You can be loud. You can drive to that Thanksgiving table right now and say every true and terrible thing sitting in your chest, in front of your sister, in front of your grandchildren, in front of God and everybody. Or you can be something colder, something quieter, something that actually protects the two kids who still call you Grandpa Chief and don't yet know what their mother has done. I thought about Ava saving me a piece of pie. I thought about what her life would look like if I let Fury make the next move instead of me. I want every door shut before she knows a single one was ever open, I told Roger. Not for me. For those kids. I want them protected first. Everything else comes after. Roger nodded once. He already had a plan forming. Revenge is loud. Justice, done right, is quiet. I chose the quiet one. Nobody tells you that justice, when it actually arrives, doesn't feel like the movies. You spend your whole life picturing the moment the truth comes out, the dramatic confrontation, the raised voice, the satisfaction of watching someone finally understand what they did. But when it's real, when it's your own daughter, when the person you have to take everything from is the same person who once fell asleep on your chest as a baby, it doesn't feel like winning at all. It feels like surgery, necessary, correct, and permanent. Roger drove me home to Winding Creek Road that night, and I sat in my driveway for a long time before I went inside, the porch light Carol used to leave on for me glowing above the door. The next morning, I called Denise first, and by 10 a. I was sitting across from an elder law attorney named Patricia Osei, whose office sat above a coffee shop on Erie Avenue, 20 minutes from my house. Roger had already called ahead. She was expecting me and had cleared her whole morning. I walked in with everything Roger had given me the night before, and she went through it the way a surgeon goes through a chart, methodical, unhurried, missing nothing. By that afternoon, the power of attorney Michelle had held over me for 2 years was formally revoked, filed, processed, effective immediately. Michelle lost every bit of legal access to my accounts before she'd finished her Thanksgiving leftovers the next day. She had no idea. Patricia then filed emergency paperwork with my life insurance carrier, reversing the beneficiary change I'd unknowingly signed 11 months earlier. Ava and Miles were restored. Dean Foster was removed entirely. My grandchildren, and only my grandchildren, would inherit what was left of that policy. Michelle still had no idea. Day 2, Roger quietly handed the full case file, 18 months of documented structuring, the falsified P.O. box, the unauthorized home equity loan, over to a detective named Marcus Webb with the Cincinnati Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit. Webb told Roger it was the cleanest, most thoroughly documented case a private citizen had ever handed his desk in 14 years on the job. Roger just nodded and said, "Thank you, same as always." Day 3, Michelle came by the house. She brought groceries, made me dinner, sat with me on the porch afterward, and asked how I was feeling, whether the dizziness had passed. "Much better," I told her. "Just needed some rest." "You scared me, Dad," she said, and I watched her face while she said it, and, God help me, I still couldn't find the lie in it. That's the part nobody prepares you for. The lying doesn't look like lying. It looks exactly like love. "I'm going to start paying a lot closer attention to things going forward," I told her, and I meant every word of it, just not in the way she understood it. Day 4. I asked Michelle to bring me copies of some old paperwork from a filing cabinet at her apartment. Documents from years back that I told her I needed for a tax question. She brought them without hesitation, without a shred of suspicion, because it never once occurred to her that the man she'd been managing for 2 years might be paying attention again. Day 6. Patricia initiated a full asset recovery filing, and working alongside Roger's documentation, helped freeze the remaining balance on the fraudulent home equity line before another dollar could move through it. She found protections I didn't know existed, legal paths that could still shore up what was left of my retirement, even after the damage that had already been done. Day 9, a Sunday. I called Michelle in the morning. "Come by tonight," I told her. "Bring the kids. I want to see Ava and Miles. I've got a lot to be thankful for this year, even with everything." She arrived at 6 with a bottle of wine and a smile that used to be the whole reason I got out of bed in the morning. Ava ran straight to the porch swing. Miles wanted to show me a video on his tablet 4 separate times before dinner was even on the table. The house smelled like the roast I'd made, and for about 20 minutes, sitting at that table with my grandchildren's laughter filling the kitchen, some small, foolish part of me almost wanted the whole last 2 years to just be a bad dream. Then, halfway through dinner, there was a knock at the front door. I stood up. I walked across my own kitchen floor, in my own house, the one Carol had chosen 30 years ago, because of how the light came through the back windows, and I opened the door. 2 detectives, plainclothes, calm, professional, unhurried. Detective Marcus Webb and his partner. I'd spoken with them 3 days earlier. They knew exactly who they were there for. I heard Michelle's fork stop against her plate behind me. I stepped aside. The detectives walked in. I watched my daughter's face in the exact moment she understood what was happening, and I want to tell you something, because it matters. There was no guilt on her face first, not right away. Her eyes moved fast, to me, to the detectives, to the door, looking for an exit that didn't exist anywhere in that kitchen. There was no exit. Every door had already been closed. Ava looked up, confused, asking what was happening, why the men were in the house. I knelt down and told her everything was going to be okay, that Grandpa Chief needed her to go play in the other room for just a minute, and she went. Because 9-year-olds trust the people who love them the same way I once trusted the woman standing at that table. Michelle stood up slowly. Her voice, when it finally came, was quiet. "Dad, please, let me explain." I looked at my daughter for a long moment. "You had 18 months to explain it to me, Michelle. You had 1,000 dinners, 1,000 phone calls, 1,000 chances. You chose every single one of those moments to smile at me instead." She didn't say anything else. The detectives read her the paperwork. They didn't cuff her in front of the kids. Webb was decent enough to walk her out to the porch first, and I stood in my own doorway and watched my only daughter get walked to an unmarked car, parked on the same street where she used to ride her bike as a little girl. Michelle pleaded guilty 4 months later. The paper trail Roger built was too complete, too clean, for any lawyer to argue their way around. Elder financial exploitation, fraudulent use of power of attorney, federal structuring charges. Restitution was ordered. It comes back slowly, the same careful, patient way it disappeared. Some of it, Patricia was honest with me, will probably never come back at all. I've made my peace with that. Most days, anyway. Some days that's the best any of us can do. But Ava and Miles are provided for. The trust I'd always meant to set up finally exists, built the right way this time, with people I trust watching over it. My grandchildren still call me Grandpa Chief. They still don't fully understand where their mother went, and I've made peace with the fact that someday, when they're old enough, that conversation will belong to me, and I intend to have it honestly, the same way Roger was honest with me. I still think about something I never fully understood until all of this happened. Michelle was my blood, but Roger, a man who married into this family and owed me nothing beyond the basic decency most people manage on their best days, chose me. When the people who are supposed to hold you up turn out to be the ones who let go first, being chosen by someone with no obligation to stay is what puts you back together. Not all the way, but enough to keep going. If this story meant something to you, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and tell me in the comments if you've ever had to protect yourself from someone who was supposed to protect you. I read every single one of them. Thank you for sitting with me through this one. I'll see you in the next story.